I would ask you to remember for just a moment the excitement that you felt the first time that someone called you doctor. Pretty exciting. It was for me, at least. No one in my family even had a college education by the time I finished medical school, and I found that to be a source of personal pride and individual accomplishment. And today, if you talk to most of your colleagues in the doctor's lounges and people that you run into out in the real world, and ask them how they feel, most of them are one of two categories. They're either frustrated and angry, or they're apathetic and burned out. The majority of physicians that I know would not want to send their own family members into this profession, and that is a true tragedy. The reason for that is because of the third-party involvement in your practice. I started my general surgery practice in 1979, solo practitioner, and within about 10 years, I'd grown the practice to 6 surgeons, and about 14 years ago, I had some issues with regard to policies of our group practice that I didn't agree with, and I was being outvoted consistently, so I left the practice and went out on my own. What was the first thing I did? Try and get on every single managed care contract again so that I could survive. And I did that, and I was killing myself, working 12 to 15 hours a week, like most of you. You know, I didn't get home very often. My family kind of grew up and around me. I didn't get a chance to go to all their activities, but that's what doctors did, right? That's kind of who we were. But there was an event that occurred in my practice that I wasn't going to talk about until I realized this is something we all need to look at from a personal standpoint. I saw this guy on a Thursday morning. He was a personal referral from a friend of mine, a urologist, who said, "Hey, I have a friend that has a hernia. He's in from out of town. Would you take a look at him and see if you can take care of it?" What was my first question to this guy? This was, what kind of insurance does he have? He said, "Well, he doesn't have any insurance, I don't think, but I wouldn't worry about it." So I see the guy and I schedule him for a bilateral inguinal hernia repair done laparoscopically. He had it it was on Thursday, he had it on Friday. It was an outpatient procedure. I saw him back in the office on Monday. And during his post-op follow-up visit, he was just all smiles, and he plops down 24 $100 bills on my office manager's desk to pay for his procedure. Wow, this is something we hadn't seen in a while. So then my practice goes on, and 2 weeks later, I swear I had 3 consecutive guys, all came into the office. They were between 35 and 45 years of age. They each one had left inguinal hernia, and they each one had Cigna HMO. And they all said, "I'm here because you're the expert in laparoscopic hernia surgery, and that's what I want. I've done my research, and oh, by the way, I expect to have an excellent outcome because of your expertise." I said, "Okay." These 3 potential litigants all went to the operating room within about a week. They all 3 had left inguinal hernia repairs, and Cigna HMO paid me a grand total of $450 per case. Therefore, I got paid just a little over half as much as this one really excited guy had paid me to do his one case. It just so happens that gentleman jumped on a plane after my office visit on that Monday morning and flew back to Damascus, Syria, which is where he lives. He could not get this operation at any price in Damascus, Syria, to what I was able to offer him. So the decision really about whether or not to participate in managed care contracts for me was an immediate gut reaction. I went to my office manager and I called all the employees, all 3 of them, together, and I said, "I want to get out of every single managed care contract that we are in." And their faces collectively went pale, and they said, "Okay." Over the next 6 months, we spent countless hours trying to extract ourselves from the insurance industry. And trust me, it is not easy. But during this period of time, I ran across a poster, or I should say a pledge, a framed pledge that I had almost forgotten about. It's on the wall of my office, and it's the American College of Surgeons Fellowship Pledge. And the Fellowship Pledge has a lot of different stuff in there, but the third paragraph starts with, "Upon my honor, I hereby declare I will not practice fee splitting." Well, this came from back in the 1913 era when the college was initiated, and it was because physicians were sending patients for surgery consultations and surgical procedures with the expectation of getting some kind of a kickback. And the college said, that's not right. That's going to lead to higher costs. It's going to lead to unnecessary procedures, and we can't have that. That's unethical. Well, if you fast forward to the 1980s and 90s time frame when managed care became all the rage, I would question whether or not actually signing a contract with an insurance company for a fee other than your usual and customary fee for the sole purpose of being able to access the patient population that this entity controls isn't the equivalent of fee splitting. Now, I brought that up at an organization that I'm the immediate past president of the American Society of General Surgeons, and at one of our meetings, I brought this story forward. It got a standing ovation. Everybody said, absolutely, you're right on, Doc, that's exactly correct. And yet none of them would opt out of any of the insurance company contracts because that's where your comfort level is. So ultimately what this is going to boil down for each and every one of us is to decide whether or not this is something that we can do financially. Is it something we can do ethically, morally? There's all kinds of, oh, and by the way, the American College of Surgeons has subsequently elected to do some revisions to their code of ethics because of all the third-party payment processes. What I experienced was a lot of applause from the sidelines. Many of my colleagues who found out that I was opting out of insurance contracts basically said, we understand, we know right where you are. These are people that sent me patients right and left. I was a busy guy. And they still send me their wife or their family member, but all of a sudden the referrals dried up because they didn't want to have to talk to the patient about, I'm sending you to this particular surgeon because I think that's who I would have operate on me or who I would have take care of my family members, but it's too much of a hassle to have to explain it. Plus, you're looking at a patient population who has an entitlement philosophy based on the insurance card. Their insurance card equals their health care, and so therefore they have a right to your service. Patients got angry, and I was labeled as the guy who didn't take insurance. We file insurance every day. We're just out of network. But the whole philosophy of the medical community is based on how it is paid. And anybody who thinks differently than that hasn't been paying very close attention. But I also was still taking care of Medicare patients at that time. And I was participating as a par participant within Medicare because I felt guilty. I felt like these people don't have a choice. So one of the things you've been hearing about earlier today was the whole the opt-out process and so forth. I said, that's not fair. We shouldn't have to make every doctor opt out. So now I don't want you to hold this against me, but as the president of the American Society of General Surgeons a few years back, I delegated myself to be the delegate from that organization to the American Medical Association House of Delegates. Not that any of you all have ever heard of that organization. I was there for 4 years. I'm now no longer an AMA delegate. But during that period of time, I introduced one resolution. That one resolution was that the AMA should write its own legislation, something it had never done. And the legislation that came out of that particular resolution was called the Medicare Patient Empowerment Act. And what it basically said was that patients ought to have the opportunity to pay for their own health care with their own dollars, regardless of what Medicare decides to pay on their behalf. In other words, make it a defined contribution plan as opposed to a defined benefit plan. And that individual physicians could use this on a case-by-case basis without having to opt out, so that you could participate in patients that you felt like you wanted to participate in Medicare, and you had the opportunity to charge a different fee, including a fee less than what Medicare approves, because right now that's illegal too. You have to charge what the Medicare allowable is, otherwise that's considered Medicare fraud to those that you charged the higher amount to. At any rate, that law actually is in Congress right now, or it's been in front of it since May of 2010. It's called the Medicare Patient Empowerment Act. It's House Resolution 1700 and Senate Bill 1042. Tom Price of Georgia is a physician who is an orthopedic surgeon. He's the one who introduced it in the House, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska introduced it in the Senate. Now, the AMA says they're going to push it, but they're not. The fact is, it's going nowhere, and we all know that, because it means that people are back in control of their own health care costs and their own health care decisions. I will tell you this, I finally decided to opt out of Medicare effective January 1 this year. And that was a difficult decision for me because as a surgeon, you know, not everybody has the ability to pay a fee as sizable as some of the surgical fees, but it has given me the opportunity to individually work with each patient. I think something said earlier about providing a niche service and so forth. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what you're going to need to do. I write a blog on a regular basis called spiritofhealthcare.com. There's one piece that is in your packet and then another piece that we've just handed out. And I would encourage you to look at that. The word, this came about, spirit of healthcare, what does that mean? Proverbs 18:14 says, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? Our profession has a broken spirit. It has been systematically crushed by all of the third-party influences, whether they be insurance companies, hospitals, government entities, legal profession, whoever you might want to point to. They are crushing the very spirit out of us, and we are responsible for renewing our own spirit. It is not going to be fixed for us. It's something we have to do on our own. And I wrote a piece in my blog that's not part of your packet or the handout. It's called Healthcare War Games. And one of the things I was hearing discussed earlier before, all this stuff that you saw, so complicated and so over the top. We have one option. Do we play their game or not? Many people still feel like they can figure a way to manipulate the system, to game the system, and somehow come out on top. But this system is geared against us. And so the only winning move, as they said at the end of, the computer said at the end of that famous 1989 movie, War Games, is the only winning move is not to play. Because there is no winning solution except to not play their game. I would also, I'd like to, I don't know how much time I have. I don't want to bore you with a whole lot of statistics and things. But there was an article that came out in Tuesday's Wall Street Journal this year, written by a physician, David LaFell, and what he talked about was that our profession is changing into more of a job where ultimately what doctors are going to want is to be able to collectively bargain and potentially go on strike. And then there was a whole sermo discussion about this issue. And believe it or not, some 30% of the physicians in this country believe that striking is a good idea. I think we're giving up our professionalism when we take that approach. And that's what the little green handout that you got was about. It's comparing what we are as professionals to a job in which the employer makes all the rules. The only rules that I think physicians should have to apply in their practice is the Hippocratic Oath and what the patient needs. And in many instances, that's what the patient should be telling In your packet, the article of Spirit of Healthcare, or Renewing the Spirit of Healthcare, ends with there's a pledge, the Independent Physicians' Rights and Obligations Pledge, and I mean that in all sincerity. We have rights too. We need to stand up for them, but we also have obligations. And I think if you'll read through that, you may find that it's something, I have it posted in every one of my exam rooms, and I've signed it, and I stick it up there and say to the patients, say, if you don't know what I stand for, read that. I'm going to conclude by simply saying that there's no secret to this great escape. There's no quick, easy solution. It requires courage. It requires commitment. And it requires communication. Communication to your patients, communication to your colleagues, and communication to yourself to keep informed, understand what is going on. You need to align yourself with other like-minded folks. Organizations like this one are certainly a major resource that you can lean on. I was actually invited to join this organization after Dr. Orient read my blog. Because she says, you need to be with us. I didn't even know this organization existed. So get out there and tell other people that are questioning it. And finally, I would just say that the excitement you felt when you were first called doctor will be rivaled by the excitement you will feel when you are finally free to practice medicine the way you were trained, and the way that you set out with those stars in your eyes that first time you actually saw your own patient. And that third-party payment process is what is holding you back from that. And I would encourage you to do whatever it takes. I may have problems with it. You're in a big group, or you're already an employed physician, or whatever it takes, because otherwise you're giving up your profession. And we need professionals in medicine. Thank you.